I'm Jen Capranov, and I will be serving as your worship associate this morning as we begin a month of exploring the theme of connection. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Unitarian Society of New Haven. We are a diverse, multi-generational faith community that inspires lives of compassion and generosity, nurtures spiritual growth, cultivates transformative connections, and creates a more just world. If this is the first time you're joining us, or your first time in a while, please contact us at the email address on the screen so we can properly welcome you to our community. If you are new to USNH, and maybe even to Unitarian Universalism, the membership team would like to help you get acquainted. We host a visitor chat right after the service each week in a special Zoom room. The first Sunday of each month includes a brief video about our denomination, as well as an introduction to our congregation, a chance to introduce yourself, as well as ask questions. All are welcome. There will be a community circle on renewal presented by the Covenantal Relations Committee and open to all, which will start 15 minutes after the service on the same Zoom link. The LGBTQ and Social Justice Task Force will hold a Zoom gathering today at noon. Please see this week's newsletter for all Zoom links. These are the words of Ashley Horan, called The Holy Work of Showing Up. How is it with your soul? This is the question that John Wesley, Anglican priest and the founder of Methodism, was known to ask of participants in small reflection groups. I ask you because, for me, this has been a hard week. So, beloveds, how is it with your souls? If your response to that question is anything like mine, I want to invite you to pause as you hear this. Take a deep breath, say a prayer, sing a song, light your chalice. Feel the force of gravity pulling us all toward the same center. Whatever helps you feel more rooted and less alone. Now, do it again, and again, and again. And once you feel that rootedness and connection, hear this. You are loved beyond belief. You are enough. You are precious. Your work and your life matter. And you are not alone. You are part of a we, a great cloud of witnesses, living and dead, who have insisted that this beautiful, broken world of ours is a blessing, worthy of both deep gratitude and fierce protection. Our ancestors and our descendants are beckoning us, compelling us onward toward greater connection, greater compassion, greater commitment to one another and to the earth. Together, we are resilient and resourceful, enough to say yes to that call, to make it our life's work in 1,000 different ways, knowing that we can do no other than bind ourselves more tightly together and throw ourselves into the holy work of showing up, again and again, to be part of building that world of which we dream, but which we have not yet seen. This chalice lighting is by Amy Williams Clark, called In This Time of Uncertainty. We gather in this time of uncertainty, full of unknowns, as angst closes in upon us. We light this chalice with a flame that draws us together. With this flame, we cut through the dankness of isolation and are warmed by the fires of our interconnectedness. For this moment, this radical moment, we find a certainty within the knowable bonds of love and community.
Here we have gathered side by side. May all who seek here find the kindly words. May all who speak here feel they have been heard. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Here we have gathered, called to celebrate days in our lifetime, matter small and great. We are all ages, women, children, men, infants and sages, sharing what we can. Sing now together this our heart's own song. Life has its battles, sorrows and regrets, but in the shadows let us not forget. We who now gather know each other's pain. Kindness can heal us as we give, we gain. Sing now in friendship this our heart's own song.
Back in August of 1997, soon after I had graduated from college, I started my career as a teacher. My first job was out at Garcia Elementary School in South Phoenix, Arizona, teaching kindergarten. I arrived there full of ideas about how I was going to help children discover their inner superhero. So I walked into my classroom the day before classes began, and my jaw hit the ground. My classroom had no windows. There was a steel reinforced door, and the classroom was filled with nothing. Well, almost nothing. There was a teacher's desk, a computer, a TV monitor, and 2 pieces of brown carpet held together with duct tape. There were no tables, no desks for students, no chairs. There were no pencils or markers, crayons or scissors. There were no books, no science equipment. I couldn't even find a curriculum anywhere. I asked a few other teachers in my wing if I had accidentally been assigned to some sort of storage room, and they told me, nope, what you get is what you get. We furnished our own room bit by bit over the years. And you know what? It was true. They had. A few of them offered me boxes of old books, and one teacher who had been there for 32 years offered to photocopy a year's worth of kindergarten busy work for me if I wanted. She said, "It works for me, and it'll keep them busy until I retire in 2 years' time." Well, I didn't know at that time that I had a UU, second principle alarm built into my brain. But that alarm started ringing and ringing in my ears. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relationships, red alert. As I began to run through ideas of how I was going to address this terrible situation, nothing immediately seemed like a solution that could work by the next day. Petition someone? Write letters? Organize a fundraiser? Tell the parents to buy everything? I soon realized there wasn't a store within 2 miles that sold school supplies, and most of the families I was serving did not own cars. Meanwhile, that principal alarm kept getting louder and louder, joined now by the third principal alarm and its call to keep learning together. The first principal alarm, which was screaming at me, how can this exoskeleton of a classroom possibly reflect the inherent worth and dignity of every person? So, with my years of college activism beneath and behind me, I marched down to the principal's office, who I had just met a half hour before, and I proposed the only thing that seemed to make sense at that moment, fully expecting her to laugh and fire me right then and there. Instead, she said, "Do what you've got to do for these kids." Those words stick with me even till today. Well, the next day I met my new class, and I did what I had to do with them. I walked around the neighborhood and met their parents and grandparents, their aunts and uncles and cousins, and surprisingly, everyone seemed to be on board with my idea for our first field trip. On the third day of classes, with calls into the Arizona Republic newspaper and local TV stations, my class and I walked out into the 96-degree desert heat, up 27th Avenue, down Buckeye Road, and we set up our class next to an off-ramp from Interstate 17. That was kind of right at the border of a much wealthier part of Phoenix. The students took turns collecting donations from passing cars as we rapped our ABCs in the background. We made the news that night, but more importantly, within 1 week, we had tables, we had chairs, and new carpet, a working TV, thanks to Motorola. We had a bookshelf stocked with new donated books donated by Wells Fargo Bank, and many other learning tools and materials that had been donated or paid for by folks who were getting off the highway. It worked. We did it. But we did something else too. We came together around a single goal. We started off our year together building something and creating a kind of covenant out of our shared need. In each of the subsequent years that I spent teaching in Phoenix and elsewhere, my classes all began with our shared space intact and mostly fully stocked. And you know what? I had some wonderful experiences and amazing students. But I don't think I ever had another class who felt so proud of where we were, what we built together, and who took care and ownership of our space the way that kindergarten group did. Now, as we feel so strongly the empty spaces in our lives that 2020 has given us, may we here in Hampden and New Haven County fill those spaces with love, with creative togetherness, with a new sense of belonging as we co-create beloved community here and now. Blessed be.
Good morning. I'm Jamie Johnson, one of your pastoral care associates. Let us turn our attention now to the concerns of the community. I invite you to join me in holding in our hearts the joys and sorrows of those around you, closing your eyes and going inward if you are comfortable doing so. Today, some woke with a sorrow so great they asked for the help of this community to carry it. Others woke with a joy so great it must be shared. Barbara and Bjorn Lundstrom share, sadly, we will not be returning as usual October 5th because we feel safer here, but we say hello to all and we miss everyone and are glad to be able to see Sunday services. Fran LaFrance Prashino requests, I am asking the congregation to keep Tatiana Senkova, my nephew's fiancée, in your hearts and prayers as she battles cancer at 30 years old. She has a very tough battle ahead and will lose a fair section of the muscle in her leg, but she is expected to survive. All prayers and healing thoughts are greatly appreciated. For the joys and sorrows that haven't been spoken, but which remain in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts, we bear witness.
I invite you into a spirit of meditation, prayer, or contemplation of ultimate things. As I walked past the flowers and plants near the entrance of USNH, it struck me how they've just kept growing, unbothered by the concerns and crises causing us humans so much hardship. I started to wonder, do they miss us coming to the building? Have they even noticed? Perhaps they're relieved by the relative quiet. Those plants and flowers remain connected to the earth and to the fundamental life force that flows through all of us, because as far as they're concerned, that's just the way things are. Nothing can get in the way of it. They grow fully into themselves because that's what life does. I invite you to turn your attention inward now. Maybe close your eyes if you like, and look for that place within yourself that recognizes that sense of connection. Even if you can't feel it right now, the echoes of past connectedness are there. As we enter a time of silence, breathe gently into that space and see what grows. May each of us keep returning to the connections that root us, nourish us, and keep us growing. Blessed be. In Unitarian Universalism, the congregation is the highest level of authority. Now, we're in covenant with other congregations through things like the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, but ultimately, we set our own priorities, we elect our own leaders, and we're responsible for raising our own money. That means that the generosity that you offer this community is directly related to how much we can accomplish together. So as the offertory plays, I invite you to go to usnh.org and in the upper right-hand corner, click where it says plate donation and give as generously as you can. Your generosity drives everything we do. Thank you so much.
Today's reading, Connection as Resistance, is by Erica A. Hewitt. In her 1975 theological treatise, Suffering, German liberation theologian Dorothee Sölle examines the way that suffering can knit human beings closer together and can draw us more fully into the process of loving. She uses the term apatheia, the inability to suffer, to describe the condition in which people become so dominated by the goal of avoiding suffering that it becomes a goal to avoid human relationships and contact altogether. Isolation and apathy are forms of powerlessness. Both destroy. In Sörle's words, we are destroyed most thoroughly by that affliction that robs us of any possibility of loving any longer. The capacity we need the most is the capacity to keep on loving. If pain and suffering tempt us to become isolated and apathetic, Sölle argues we must instead give voice to our suffering by creating a language of lament that might draw us into solidarity. The theology offered by Dorothee Sölle echoes that of her rough contemporary Hannah Arendt, who was a political theorist rather than a theologian. One of Arendt's most well-known assertions from her work, The Origins of Totalitarianism, is that totalitarianism is organized loneliness, and that the seed of loneliness is isolation. The experience of not belonging to the world at all, which is among the most radical and desperate experiences of human beings. Therefore, resisting the isolation that breeds loneliness is not just an emotional, psychological, or even a spiritual act, but it is a political one. The blogger and critic Maria Popova puts it this way: our insistence on belonging, community, and human connection is one of the greatest acts of courage and resistance in the face of oppression.
As 2019 drew to a close, I expected that all kinds of advertising, events, programs, and so on would engage with wordplay about the new date. In 2020, get a clear look at your skin. 2020 is the year to envision your retirement plans. I mean, the metaphors about 2020 vision were sitting right there. They carried the risk of ableism too, but I'll hold that sermon for another day. So as we approached the new year, I saw those things coming, but that was before 2020 became 2020. Global pandemic, worsening climate chaos, presidential impeachment, school closures, the death of a Supreme Court justice, massive job losses, murder hornets and swarms of locusts, for goodness sake. 1941 may have had a day that lives in infamy, but 2020 is having an entire year, and we're only 3/4 of the way through it. In one sense, all those metaphors about 2020 vision were put on hold. As I thought about it more and more, though, I've realized that this has been the year when the world as it actually is has been laid bare for everyone to see. Some people have never been fooled by the mist. Others are only just now waking up. Precisely because of its 2020-ness, this year has given us a painful but necessary gift. It says to us plainly, you can no longer claim you didn't know. The murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd became tipping points in the struggle against police brutality. All over the world, we saw protesters proclaim that Black Lives Matter. Suddenly, by which I mean after decades of activists laying the foundation, suddenly, communities all over the country are talking about moving funding away from policing and towards social services that prevent the need for policing. People are reimagining answers to the questions, what would real safety look like and feel like? Parents of school-age kids and little ones have been struggling since March, with schools and daycares had to close due to COVID-19. Having to juggle jobs and your children's education, if you're still lucky enough to have work. Giving up jobs and putting careers on hold because the juggling wasn't sustainable. The relentlessness of being with your kids 24/7, perhaps without respite even from nearby family members. If the underfunding of education weren't apparent before, think about this. If schools had already had smaller class sizes with better, smaller teacher to student ratios, then going back to in-person learning wouldn't be so fraught with danger. Sure, schools would still need to make adaptations and accommodations, but the baseline pod size would be exponentially safer. Now, I love Jesse's message for all today, with its story of a group banding together to take care of each other and make something extraordinary happen. And I'm furious that such an action was even necessary. When a bunch of kindergartners need to stand by a highway off-ramp to raise a bunch of money because their classrooms don't even have chairs for them, then something structural, something systemic is seriously wrong. It makes me think of that old poster. It would be a great day when our schools get all the money they need and the Air Force has to hold a bake sale to buy a bomber. The coronavirus itself has demonstrated clearly how interconnected we are as a species. The first cases cropped up in Wuhan, China, became an epidemic there, and then moved across the globe to become a pandemic. It spreads through teeny tiny droplets we send out simply by talking or singing, much less sneezing or coughing. From that first person who unknowingly caught it, at least 33.8 million others have followed suit. Now, I've heard many people talk about what they'll do once a vaccine is available and we get back to normal. And every time I think to myself, that normal is gone, and we need to stop pretending that it's coming back. It's not possible to resume our former lives because everything has changed. How could it not? Humans as a species are experiencing an ongoing trauma. Truths that remained invisible to certain segments of the population have had their covers ripped away. Crises that some of us have had enough privilege to ignore or set aside are knocking on everyone's door now. Besides, that normal had us on a trajectory with a far higher body count than the 1 million people who have died from COVID-19 so far. There's an Ani DeFranco song with the line, "Every tool is a weapon if you hold it right." I'd have you consider its inverse as well. The deep connectedness that caused a deadly virus to spread can also become a tool for building a better world if we hold it right. Air may temporarily carry contagions, but air also connects us intimately. Ralph Keeling, a professor at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, studies the concentration of oxygen in the atmosphere at about a dozen locations around the world. According to a 2014 article by Kurt Stager, Keeling showed that oxygen gas emitted by plants and plankton mixes throughout each respective hemisphere within 2 months and spreads worldwide in a little more than a year. So any given breath includes molecules that were once in the lungs of Harriet Tubman, William Shakespeare, the Buddha, or a dinosaur. The concept brings all levels of the word inspiration to life. When we take care of our own well-being, its effects ripple outward. For example, Professors James Fowler and Nicholas Christakis have posited that we can affect people in our social networks even if we've never met them. In one of their analyses of data from a longitudinal study called the Framingham Heart Study, they looked specifically at whether happiness can be spread from person to person. People were asked how often they experienced certain feelings during the previous week. I felt hopeful about the future. I was happy. I enjoyed life. I felt that I was just as good as other people. The researchers found that the relationship between people's happiness extends up to 3 degrees of separation. For example, to the friends of one's friends' friends. People who are surrounded by many happy people and those who are central in the network are more likely to become happy in the future. Longitudinal statistical models suggest that clusters of happiness result from the spread of happiness and not just a tendency for people to associate with similar individuals. They concluded, people's happiness depends on the happiness of others with whom they are connected. This provides further justification for seeing happiness, like health, as a collective phenomenon. Now, if you're tempted to think, oh no, I've been having a hard time during the pandemic, and that means that I'm bringing down my entire network, or even more poignantly, I have chronic depression, and therefore I'm making everyone around me miserable too. Please put that on pause. As we heard in today's reading, suffering can knit human beings closer together and can draw us more fully into the process of loving. And even more important are the words from the call to worship. You are loved beyond belief. You are enough. You are precious. Your work and your life matter, and you are not alone. Please never let anyone, including yourself, try to convince you otherwise. We have more power to affect change than we give ourselves credit for. There's an episode of Doctor Who in which the Doctor's companion asks him about the rules of time travel. She doesn't want to say, step on a butterfly and send ripples through time that cause her to never be born. At one point, she gets frustrated that the doctor isn't taking her seriously enough. "Every choice I make in this moment, here and now," she says, "could change the whole future." To which the doctor replies, "Exactly like every other day of your life." Looking for inspiration, taking care of ourselves and those in our circles, using our power wisely. We carry these tools with us all the time, and we have a million chances, large and small, to use them every day. In this interconnected web of existence of which we are a part, our choices make a difference. We're bound together, even when we don't realize it, or don't remember it, or just can't feel it. Innocence hasn't always been considered virtue to hold on to. Wisdom and experience were more highly valued. Our task in this great turning is to keep our eyes open, keep our hearts and minds open to the revelation unfolding before us. My hope is that when our descendants look back on 2020, it won't be remembered as the year of hot messes and dumpster fires, but as the moment when humanity chose the path of spiritual maturity and loving mutuality. Amen, and blessed be.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow. But if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. It won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride if I have things you need to borrow. No one can fill those of your needs that you won't let go. Lean on me when you're not strong, I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. For it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. If there is a load you have to bear that you can't carry, I'll share your load. If you just won't lean on me when you're not strong, I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. For it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Just don't worry, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Friends, our sanctuary may be empty, but our hearts overflow. We may not be able to see each other's faces, but we sense each other's goodwill. We may struggle to feel connected, but we are never truly alone. So go in peace, with courage and with kindness, and choose to be a blessing to this world. Amen, and blessed be.